Hey everyone, Bible Nerd here. Thanks for joining me on this Holy Week study that we're going through the passages in the Bible that relate to Holy Week. Tuesday is the third day of Holy Week, or what's known as Holy Tuesday. This is after Jesus has entered Jerusalem on the colt on Palm Sunday. This is after he's done some cleansing of the temple, even though it looks like there may be other days that he also came back and visited the temple to meet with people, to speak these incredible parables that we have in the story. But there's also some stories that may not quite match up with Tuesday or Wednesday of this week. They might be a little bit out of order because really the big events are starting to kind of build up. So you can see that the writers may have been trying to do some foreshadowing. There may have been some stories that were before, but they kind of lumped them all together, all the parables together. And I don't know if it's really all that crazy important to know exactly what happened on Tuesday and Wednesday, but it's the idea of kind of building this narrative of what's happening from the day he enters Jerusalem to the day that he is betrayed by Judas. You've got the Last Supper, you've got the crucifixion, and obviously the resurrection of Jesus on Easter on Sunday. So Tuesday is a day that's filled with a bunch of different stories that may have been on those days that I think are just great to highlight. So if you open up your Bible, let's go to Matthew chapter 21, and you can follow along with me with some of these stories and just see some of the what may have happened during these days. And you can just see the tension is kind of building a little bit. Obviously, it's been building up to this point, but he's starting to step on more and more people's toes, if you will. I mean, he's messed with their economics, by overturning the tables, pointing out their hypocrisy, and pointing out the fact that they turned this place into a den of thieves. But leading up to that point, all the blasphemies, all the miracles, all the stuff that he's done, the breaking of the Sabbaths in their mind. There's so many times where it looks as if he's kind of questioning whether they're really following the heart and the purpose of the Sabbath by doing some of these things on the Sabbath, like healing people and doing these incredible things where they miss out on the miracle because it just did it on the wrong day. So these things are starting to build and build to the point where more and more of the leaders are starting to kind of get together, so to speak, to say, okay, this guy is going to cause a lot of problems for us, for Rome, for the people, everybody. So let's go to Matthew chapter 21. I want to get into one of the first stories in here. There's a quick story about the fig tree that's in Mark and Matthew. That's kind of an interesting little story there. But I want to talk about kind of the one story here that jumps off right about the same time frame in both Gospels, Mark and Matthew. And it's a story about Jesus's authority being questioned. And I think it's a really fascinating story, and I just love the way he answers it. And let's just dive right into it. So let's go to Matthew chapter 21. This is where the leaders are asking, by what authority are you doing these things? What authority are you able to raise Lazarus from the dead? How are you able to feed all these people? Why are you able to speak with such power on this type of? Where is your authority coming from? And I love the way he answers it. So let's go to that in the 24th verse. But Jesus answered them and said to them, I also will ask you one thing, which if you tell me, I will likewise tell you by what authority I do these things. The baptism of John, this is John the Baptist. Where was it from? From heaven or from men? So they reasoned among themselves, saying, if we say from heaven, he will say to us, why then did you not believe him? If we say from men, we fear the multitude, for all count John as a prophet. So they answered Jesus and said, we do not know. They just cop out on the question. They get painted into a corner. And I got to think this is something where they probably didn't like this. On top of everything else Jesus is doing, they kind of pin him into a corner, and they know that he's kind of got them trapped. So they just kind of cop out on it and just don't answer the question. So next, we got a parable of the wicked vine dressers. This is a great parable that is the story of this landowner that has a pretty significant piece of land that they're growing these vineyards on that are going to bear this fruit. So then the vine dressers are supposed to be kind of taking care of this land while the landowner goes away, right? Then the landowner says, well, it's now time for seasons, time for harvest. So he sends servants back to be able to meet with these vine dressers, and they end up killing them. So he ends up sending more servants that are even more better respected and even more of them, and they kill them again or send them off or beat them or do whatever they're going to do as these servants show up, to the point where finally the landowner says, I'm going to send my son. Surely they'll respect my son. And instead of respecting the son, what do? They say, hey, this is the heir. Let's kill him and seize his inheritance. So they took him, cast him out of the vineyard, and killed him. So Jesus says this parable to these listeners and said, okay, what do you think the landowner is going to do when he shows back up? He sent servant after servant after servant, prophet after prophet, seer after seer, all this stuff. And all the time, they end up killing these prophets. And so many times in the Gospels, or excuse me, in the Bible, you see these prophets that are more revered afterwards, that are persecuted and even killed, trying to point out the sins and the evils of the fallen people, to the point where they end up even killing them, that they don't realize they were a prophet till it's way too late, and then they start revering the people. So he says right here, he says, the people respond. So Jesus says, hey, what's going to happen to those vine dressers when the landowner shows up? And they say, well, he'll destroy them. The landowner will destroy these wicked men for what they've done and give the vineyard over to people that will respect him and give the fruits in their season. Jesus said to them, have you never read in Scripture, the stone which the builders rejected has become the chief cornerstone? That would have been a light bulb moment for the Israelites. It's in Psalm 118. It's in Isaiah. The New Testament has it quoted a bunch of times. It's in Romans, Ephesians. That would have been a light bulb moment, I think, for the Israelite people. They would have been like, well, yep, got it. I think that's something that really would have resonated with the Israelite people, just because it is referenced in some of those other passages. Then there's a parable of the wedding feast. That's in chapter 22. Let's go to chapter 22, verse 15. This is another one of those moments I really wanted to highlight in this video. This is the idea where the Pharisees try to kind of trap Jesus to show that he is a zealot, or to try to get him in trouble with the Romans by not paying taxes. That was a big way that the Romans kind of oppressed those people, as this heavy taxation, that they're trying to kind of trap Jesus in a way that will make him an enemy to the Romans as well. And his answer, just like when they're talking about whose authority is Jesus, by what authority is he doing these things, I think he's able to spin this question on him as well. So let's read that. Chapter 22 of Matthew, verse 15. Then the Pharisees went and plotted how they might entangle him in his talk. And they sent him their disciples with the Herodians, saying, Teacher, we know that you are true and teach the way of God in truth. Nor do you care about anyone, or you do not regard the person of man. So they're just buttering him up. That's really what they're trying to do, is say, hey, we know you're true. You're speaking truth. You are obviously, there's a lot of times where his words and his power and the way that he spoke was like authority, like he actually was speaking from the heart, but also speaking truth out of the word. So these Pharisees ask him a question. Tell us, therefore, what do you think? Is it lawful, so the law of Moses, is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar or not? Trying to trap him, trying the same kind of thing that he kind of trapped him in a sense. It may not have been the same Pharisees that were having this conversation, but you can see that he's trying to maybe give him one or two answers that will basically be able to get him in trouble really with the Romans, or get him in trouble with his followers that want there to be this revolt, to be this Messiah who's going to overturn Rome. There's so many of them ready to pull their swords out and go fight the Romans, where Jesus was in his delicate balance, that's not what he was there to do, or at least the way they thought they were going to do. So that the Zealots wanted to do some certain way of overthrowing Rome. The Pharisees were trying to get him in trouble with Rome, so that you could just see so much of the politics going on with what was happening, and his response diffuses the entire thing. It's just amazing. It's just brilliant how he responds. Jesus perceived their wickedness and said, Why do you test me, you hypocrites? Show me the tax money. In Mark, it actually says, show me a denarius. A denarius, or denarii, was 1 day's wages. It was a coin that was equal to 1 day's wages. So they brought him one of these denarius and said, Jesus said to them, whose inscription and whose image and inscription is on this? So he's specifically saying, hey, okay, whose inscription and image is on this? Is it God's? well, who is this? What is this honoring? What tribute is this? And of course, what do they say? It's Caesar. So the Pharisees answer, it's Caesar. That's who's on the coin. That's who's on that denarii. And he said to them, render therefore to Caesar the things that are Caesar, these man-made coins, this man-made system, this man-made way of oppression, this wealth, this worldly thing. Give it to Caesar, but give to God what is God's. When they heard this, they marveled and left him and went on their way. Just left them probably speechless. They were like, gotcha. I don't know how else to do it. They were trying to trap him. They end up getting reversed to where, and it's so amazing how he diffuses the situation. You got to think as people are sitting there waiting for his answer on bated breath. There's everybody in this area that's probably listening to this conversation wants him to answer one of those two questions. They all have motives on, hey, we want him to say, don't pay taxes. We want an excuse and a reason not to pay the taxes. Then the Pharisees say, hey, say we can't pay taxes because we need to be able to turn you over to the Romans. The Romans are going to say, hey, it's just going to cause a lot of problems with no matter how he answers it. So he answers in a way that answers it in the perfect way for everybody. That leaves everybody just like, okay, he didn't say not to pay taxes. He didn't answer it, but he did. Isn't that what's brilliant about it? He answered it, but didn't answer it. But he answers it in a way that makes you really say, okay, give to the world the things that are the world, but give the things that matter, the heart, your soul, your mind, your strength, your talents. Those things are intangibles. They're worth way more than any denarii, any talent, any gold bar, whatever it happens to be, and whatever man-made structure that we have for what things are valuable. So I really find that to just be just a great answer to that particular question. The next one, let's go on to the next one. Excuse me. The next one is really an interesting, again, another way to try to trap or I don't know if it's trick or just something to try to get an answer out of Jesus. And I think this is a very interesting one. So Pharisees are the one that's mentioned a lot. There's the Pharisees and the Sadducees are kind of the right and left wings of the religious orders. You got ones that are a little bit more conservative on how they interpret Moses' law. Then you got some that are a little bit more progressive on what they're trying to do. And so they always are kind of the two power structures within the religious rulers. So you kind of have these two kind of groups that are taking root on how they direct the policies of the people. And so the Sadducees, one of the things I mentioned here is they say there's no resurrection. Now, we're not just talking about the resurrection of Jesus. We're talking about just the resurrection in general. There's a thought and a line of thinking that there will be this resurrection, a reuniting of heaven and earth, so to speak, and it would be a resurrection. So Sadducees don't think there's going to be that, but in the laws of Moses, there's this law that they were trying to kind of maybe pin Jesus down with it or kind of see which side that he's leaning on or just kind of get his answer to this. And again, he spins it on its head and just completely tears the argument apart, which is just amazing. So in this right here, it says, Moses said that if man dies having no children, his brother shall marry his wife and raise up offspring for his brother. This is a way to keep the family name going on. This is a way to make sure that your father's father's father, that lineage continues on as part of inheritance. I mean, it's a very big deal. It's a social structure, social safety net was having these families that would carry on the family name. It was a very, very big deal to the Israelite people and still much of the cultures around today. So it was very big. It was a very big deal at that time. So they had a law. The law of Moses said that if a brother passes away and has a wife, doesn't have any kids, then the brother's supposed to marry that wife and give an offspring. But the Sadducees come up with a crazy little story here and say, well, there are 7 brothers. All of them had the wife. All of them passed away. Then she passes away with no children. So in the resurrection, whose wife will she be? All 7 men had her, but never had any offspring. So what happens in that scenario? And I love how Jesus reacts to this. He says, Jesus answering and saying to them, you are mistaken, not knowing the scriptures nor the power of God. For in the resurrection, they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are like the angels of God in heaven. But concerning the resurrection of the dead, have you not read what was spoken to you by God, saying, I am the God of Abraham, I am the God of Jacob, I am the God of Abraham, I'm the God of Isaac, I'm the God of Jacob. God is not the God of the dead, but of the living. I think that's such a powerful statement that his focus isn't after the death. His focus is living. That's what really matters to him, because once we're done with this life, there's not a sense that we can do anything to redeem, that we can't experience the things we can experience. We can't have the trials and the passions and the experiences and all the things we can have while we're alive once we're dead. And I think that that's really what he's trying to emphasize here. When the multitudes heard this, they were astonished at his teaching. I think this resonated so much in the Israelites that that the resurrection isn't going to be the same as what it is. The rules and the world and the structures aren't going to be the same once we're in that next life. And I think that's what he's trying to say here, that we need to be way more important, think a lot more about the living than the dead. Because once they're dead, there isn't a chance to be able to redeem or do the things that are necessary to give that person the best life possible. In a sense, it's already too late. So why focus on what will happen when we're dead? I think so many people are so worried about that they miss life. They miss out on the joys. They miss out on all this stuff thinking about death, when really you've got today. So think about today. That's what I would say to that. Let's go. This is a really great passage now. So now we're in the same chapter, chapter 24. We're going to go to the 34th verse. This is one of my favorite parts of these parables and this time while Jesus is in this Holy Week time. This is one of the things I really wanted to emphasize in this video. It talks about this. But when the Pharisees heard that he had silenced the Sadducees, so after that conversation, they gathered together. Then one of them, a lawyer, asked him a question, testing him. He said, "Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law?" Jesus said to him, Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 5, known as the Shema. It reads, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. This is the first and great commandment. The second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commands hang all the laws and the prophets." I think that is one of the more powerful statements that Jesus made during this entire thing, because you've got all these laws, 613 laws in the Torah, plus all the interpretations of those laws, just order, the rules, all this stuff that was happening. He tears it all, and not necessarily tears it all down, but just clarifies the reason behind all of it. If you're not doing it for these reasons, you're missing the point of the law. You really are missing the point of the law. So it's in Deuteronomy. I would really recommend you check out a video the Bible Project did, BibleProject.com. They're also on YouTube. Does an incredibly beautiful breakdown of the depth of that statement in Deuteronomy. What the original Hebrew word was for heart, soul, mind, how that's changed and how it's been translated, but what it really meant to an Israelite and what those words in the original language were. I think this is one of the great studies you can do. Now, you can get really stuck in the original Hebrew words on just every little tittle that's in everything. But if there's one that you really want to study, if you want to do any kind of study on the original words, I think one of the great places to start is the Shema. So check that out, Deuteronomy 6. Check out the Bible Project's video on that. I think it's one of the more powerful things you can recite every single day. In fact, that's what the Israelite people have done for centuries, is recite this saying, that you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. I think it's really, really powerful. All right, let's see. We've got a couple of things I wanted to highlight here. Let me check my notes. Hope you're enjoying the video. Hope you're enjoying Holy Week. I love studying this stuff. I love reading this stuff. I love this journey, and I hope that you're enjoying it as well. So let's read on a couple other things. So one of the other things that I've read that is most likely happened during the holy days leading up to this, leading up to the Last Supper and some of the events that we'll talk about in the next couple of days, is this idea of the Olivet Discourse. This is some of the sayings and some of the things Jesus did. They're kind of like a mini apocalypse, like a little bit of a woes, lamentations, prophecies. They're also calling some people out. Frankly, they're just calling people out for some of the wickedness and some of the things that are going to happen. That is just kind of the tribulations and some of the stuff that's going to happen. The Son of Man character is really highlighted here, that that's who Jesus was. And I have to say that I have a lot of people that I talk to that that talk about whether Jesus was God. And one of the things I always say, well, Jesus was the Son of God. But a lot of times he's actually references himself, and a lot of times if he asks people what they think he is or who he thinks, he basically says, "Who does everybody think I am?" And a lot of times, you're the Messiah, you're the Son of God. The Son of Man character is the moniker he seems to take on more than almost any other moniker, and I think there's some truth in that that probably resonates more with the Israelite people than we do now, so far removed from it. But the Son of Man character in the Daniel visions, all the way back to the Adam and Eve story of the snake crusher that was going to come from the Son of Man through Eve, through Adam, through David, that there was going to be this snake crusher that would eventually sit on the throne of God. And the only person that does that is God. So there is this idea that's really played out that this Son of Man character would, I think, would have resonated a lot more with the Israelite people than we probably miss today. And it's one of the things that got him in probably the most trouble. That was the moniker that by saying that, the Israelite people really said, hey, this guy's claiming to be God. This guy's claiming and doing things only God can do. So I think there's some incredible things that are happening during this passage in Mark and Matthew. So I want to just bring that out. I think if you have some time, go ahead and read through that. I want to see if there's anything else we want to talk about today before we get on there. If you have any comments, questions, please post those. This is a journey I've been going through for a few years now, and just love studying this stuff. I just love reading it, seeing what the differences are between the books, the different accounts, the different gospels. But now we're going to start getting into the events of Wednesday, Thursday, Friday that I think are going to be really fascinating. So I hope you stay on this journey with me. Please let me know what I got right, what I got wrong, anything you can add to this conversation. I'd love to be a part of it. I really thank you for watching this video, going through this journey with me. And it's just an incredible time to be a Christian. This is an incredible time to study these documents. There's just so much more knowledge that we have now that they didn't even have 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 100 years ago. They're right here at our fingertips, right here in these wonderful translations that we have. And I just love this journey. So appreciate your time. Again, please comment, like, subscribe, share, and we'll have the next video out for you tomorrow. That's going to be talking about the next day of Holy Week, which is Wednesday, which is also known as Spy Wednesday. So we'll talk to you tomorrow, and God bless. Hope you have a wonderful day.